Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't.
Have you ever experienced the fear of sharing your opinion at work or had the feeling like you're walking on eggshells in a relationship? The absence of psychological safety probably plays a vital role in each of these scenarios. Dr. Amy Edmondson, a Harvard Business School professor, identified psychological safety as a key factor in innovative companies and stable relationships. Amy has won numerous awards, including the Most Influential Thinker in Human Resources by HR Magazine in 2019. I loved her book, The Right Kind of Wrong, which delves into this topic and has won prestigious awards like the Financial Times and Schroders Business Book of the Year in 2023. Join Amy and me as she shares what psychological safety entails, how to nurture it in professional and personal settings, and why it's crucial for success in both spheres. Dr. Amy Edmondson, who has asked me to call her Amy, a hearty welcome to Super Psyched.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh,
it's going to be fun.
Gosh, it's so interesting when I think about all of the variables that are the game-changing variables. I'm going to put this at the top of Everest. This is the one. And you stumbled upon psychological safety, which turns out to be perhaps the number one predictor of innovation. I would surmise in sustainability in relationships of any kind. And you title your book, which was so delicious, The Right Kind of Wrong, which feels like it's at the heart of psychological safety. What is psychological safety?
The psychological safety is a perception or a belief that your interpersonal environment is safe for risk-taking, meaning speaking up with embarrassing things, or I need help, or I have a question, or I totally disagree with your point of view. I think our listeners will recognize all of those things as not always easy, right? There's some environments where, of course, you'd say that. You're just going to be direct and authentic. And in other environments, you're tiptoeing. You're trying to make sure this is okay around here. And psychological safety describes that perception that this environment is safe for the risks, the straight stuff. Not that it's easy or comfortable. And I think that people who've heard of the concept and maybe haven't really looked at the work carefully have decided, oh, psychological safety, that means I'm comfortable and I'm never triggered by anything. And that's just really not it. In fact, if anything, psychological safety describes an environment that's comfortable for discomfort, that it's okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable because of what's at stake, because we care about our patients' health, or because we're really excited about this new innovation that customers might just absolutely love if we can pull it off. And so there's a sense in which the ultimate goals are more important than saving face.
Yeah, I'm getting this sense it's the opposite of brittle. It means that...
Yeah. It's the opposite of brittle. Yeah, I love that. One of my wonderful advisors, Chris Schroders, who's no longer alive, was really one of the huge thinkers about organizational learning and particularly management conversations that were, in his view, very non-learning conversations. And he thought many high achievers, especially, were quite brittle, right? Because you really get quite attached to the success and being right and all of that. And I remember admitting to Chris, I said, but Chris, I think I am brittle. And he said, yes, but you're not brittle about being brittle. That's it, right? It's double loop learning. I see that flaw. I see that desire in me, that unwillingness to take risks or that desire to be right or what have you. But I go meta. I'm aware of it. And then I say, oh, that's not going to work, Amy. You got to do better. You got to be more learning oriented.
Susan Jeffers wrote a book whose title changed my life, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's this self-awareness.
Exactly.
I know the areas where I suck in my relationship with my wife, and she's well aware of them too. And I still persist and try to do better. And she loves me anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm still striving to be better and to be less brittle in the areas where I'm brittle.
Me too. I sense that's going to be a lifelong
Exactly.
quest.
I will die not having completed it.
Right. But we'll get better. We'll get better.
Get better.
It's all about better.
It's all about better. It's about, what do they call it? It's improvement, not perfection, or
progress.
Progress, not perfection. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that. Well, let's talk about why it's so important in so many domains. I even see it, as I mentioned, relationally, like when I was looking to get married at some point, a criterion that I wasn't able to name in your words was psychological safety. I knew that I couldn't walk on eggshells. I knew I had to just be me, and she had to know me, and I had to know her.
Right.
Let's talk about it, though, in the context of so many areas where psychological safety makes a difference. Why is it so important? What does it do?
The reason it's so important is that, like it or not, we live in an uncertain, complex, interdependent world, right? So if that's reality, rather than some kind of predictable, comfortable world, if our world was totally predictable and comfortable, we would not need psychological safety, because we would just be doing what we did and it would get the results we're supposed to get all the time. But because of the reality we actually live and work in, we are perpetually in need of risk-taking. There's really two kinds. One is the sort of the experimenting we do in new territory to see what happens, and oops, failed. Or, hey, cool, something new and interesting happened. And those are little moments of bravery, sometimes larger, smaller and larger acts of bravery when we're experimenting with something new in our lives or in our jobs. And then there's the other, which is just that ability to catch and correct errors before they spiral out of control. The willingness to speak up when you see an error, or you see something wrong, or when you need help because you don't know how to do something, you feel embarrassed to ask. So because of the nature of reality, there is a need for psychological safety to be effective, both to innovate and to improve and just achieve excellence in familiar territory.
I'm thinking about the container. The container itself has to be strong enough to hold all of this stuff, the moments of feeling triggered and somehow finding a way to work it out and not just walk away triggered. The idea of not rubber stamping something that is subpar, that can happen because I don't want to hurt their feelings. Well, guess what? They're about to give a presentation in front of 100 people who are going to throw tomatoes at their face.
Yes.
Let's correct this. I remember, I think you're going to love this story. I had a new boss, and I was known for giving a particular presentation to people very well. I was the guy. My new boss, Martin Dorner, comes in, and I'm thinking to myself, I am going to impress him so much. I will be the apple of his eye. I go back to my desk. This is the old days when we printed things. There are 20 bullet points on my desk. He loved it so much. He put on 20 things that I could improve upon, and 19 were correct. So I will forever think of that moment as one of the most loving things a human could do for me.
Absolutely.
My presentation became so much better.
Absolutely. But your first reaction is very human, which is, oops. I mean, you see 20 bullet points and it's, what the hell, right? That's not what I wanted. I wanted just plain applause, like we all do. We just want, yeah, that was great. That was perfect. Nothing to change.
Total cognitive dissonance for me in the moment. Like, I did this so well. What?
Yeah,
Except
what are you
the fact
talking
that he was
about?
right.
I know. And what a gift. If I'm reviewing a paper, say, if it's not very good, you're going to get a short review. Right?
Oh my God.
Right? If it's really promising, you're going to get a long review.
Wow.
Right? Because if it's not good, it basically has no chance to get to this particular journal, let's say. So it just seems, and where do you begin? But if it's very good, that means it has a finite number of flaws that can be corrected.
How interesting. And there's this weird equilibrium between taking chances and staying safe. And I'm thinking about you in that context of wanting to make sure that they don't do the wrong kind of wrong. Let's talk about that, because you could contrast the right kind of wrong, which is innovating, taking chances and safe, perhaps simulations and other places where nobody dies. But let's talk about the wrong kind of wrong for a minute.
Yeah, so there's more than one wrong kind of wrong. There's one right kind of wrong, but there's quite a few ways to get the wrong kind of wrong. Just let me illustrate, right? Sloppy work. Mail it in. Don't try hard. If you don't try hard and you get a failure, then that's the wrong kind of wrong. Let's say you forgot to press record in this conversation and we got to the end of our time together and you realized, oops, I forgot to press record. So that would be a real shame, right? Because this is familiar territory, sort of. You're holding your head. I'm thinking, oh my God, did he forget? No, it says right up here, recording.
And in my 225 interviews, there was one where I forgot to hit record.
There you go.
Yeah,
right?
so I'm just kind of crumbling. Yes,
right. It's all coming back in the most painful way.
It was not great, and it was definitely the wrong kind of wrong.
Right. What makes it the wrong kind of wrong is not just some random judgment that I just made. It's that it's familiar territory. If you are recording a podcast, you must press record. That's a given. That's a fact. Now, it's not blameworthy to forget, right? You're a fallible human being. You can make mistakes, but it's certainly not celebratory either.
No, it was not a celebration. Keep going.
So that's one, it's just sort of a very preventable error. When you're at your best, when you're vigilant, there's something you wouldn't do. Let's go along this spectrum. Let's say you are driving and texting and you get into a car accident. Wrong kind of wrong, right? We know better, right? We know better. We shouldn't do that. There are failures that happen that are caused by human error. Again, that doesn't mean it's necessarily blameworthy, but we don't learn a whole lot from them other than, oops, shouldn't do that. And then there are failures like the breakdown of supply chains during the pandemic. They're clearly not good. They're not blameworthy. They're just the combination of so many unexpected things happening at the same time. They're what we call the perfect storm. So those are part of life, but they're not the kind that we're talking about here as right kind of wrong. I call those complex failures. And then the right kind of wrong are intelligent failures, which are basically the undesired result of thoughtful experiment. A bold move that you had every right to believe could have worked. You'd done your homework, and no bigger or more dangerous than necessary to get the result, to get the new knowledge, right? So you think carefully about human safety, you think carefully about sort of economic consequences. You don't bet everything you own on an uncertain investment, for example. So it's a matter of the size being appropriate to the risk that you're willing and able to take to make progress. And every scientist on earth or inventor or innovator or elite athlete, to that matter, lives and dies based on their willingness to take risks, right? To experiment in a safe way, to push the envelope of what's possible, to bring new discovery.
I was talking to Jeremy Utley at Stanford School of Design, and he said quantity generates quality. So the number of ideas that we come up with generates better ideas, even if some of the ideas are, so to speak, stupid, which leads me to a story, and I hope and pray it's not apocryphal, but here's how it allegedly goes. Steve Jobs would say to Johnny Ives before lunch, hey, want to hear a stupid idea? And Johnny would say, yes. I don't know if that's entirely true, but it was conveyed to me from someone credible. And I love that idea because all you need to do is change a variable on a stupid idea and suddenly it becomes genius.
Exactly. And that's what the great innovators, or IDEO, for example, as a sort of organization that's built and set up to innovate. That's what they understand too, right? It's just more ideas are better than not more ideas. Even if 90% of them are stupid or aren't going anywhere, they will trigger an idea in someone else that is going somewhere, right? So there's this willingness to generate crazy on the path toward progress.
Let's talk about the companies that are really doing it. What does it look like and how can we replicate it? That's a big question.
First of all, if you think of a company, there's little companies like IDEO that are 100% about right kind of wrong, 100% about innovating in new territory. They have a whole discipline and process of ideating and then selecting and testing and developing. That's all they do, really. Companies that are of a certain size will have R&D departments or innovation departments, but they'll also have routine production departments over here. And so if you think of a company that does this well, by which I mean does failure well, they are as passionate about preventing preventable failures as they are about generating intelligent failures or generating progress in new territory. The wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
So they're as committed to very high standards in familiar territory, to worker safety, to product quality, to absolute uniformity of procedures so that you get what you get every single time in the known territory, or service companies that are committed to having a positive and friendly interaction with customers, or an appropriate interaction with customers every time. The very best are committed to that. And they
100%.
do everything they can to train and give feedback and help people deliver on their promise. Meanwhile, they also figure out how to put into place the conditions where people are actively, energetically experimenting with things, some of which, in fact, maybe even most of which, won't work. But they will bring new knowledge that will then help us find the path toward what does work.
Outstanding. What are some of the ways that a manager or someone on the team could help cultivate greater psychological safety?
It's a great question. And the answer is going to be so mundane, you're going to think, really? That's all there is? But it does start with calling attention, wait for it, to reality, right? So it's calling attention to reality in a thoughtful way. If you are a scientist in leading edge biochemistry laboratory, you're constantly saying, wow, we're doing work that no one anywhere on earth has done yet. If we hurry and keep trying and test great ideas and keep up with the literature, we have the chance of making breakthrough discoveries before anyone else does. So you're saying, guess what? This is the kind of work we do here. Oh, and part of reality, we might get scooped at any moment. So let's keep working hard. So you're calling attention to features of reality that, in particular, depending on what the reality is, call for people to take risks. Like, you're in a scientific laboratory, you better be experimenting with wild stuff if you want really big discoveries. Or if you are on a Toyota production line, you're calling attention to the absolute commitment we have to the highest possible quality, yet knowing full well that things will go wrong. So the team members who are willing to pull that end-on cord in a timely way to say, not so sure about this moment here, just something, I can't even put my finger on it, but it doesn't look quite right. That you're saying that that's the behavior that this reality calls for excellence. So notice that excellence looks very different in a leading edge biochemistry lab compared to an automotive assembly line. But in both cases, by being clear and passionate about where we are and what matters, you're getting people on the same page, and you're getting people in a mindset which allows them to recognize, yeah, I guess we're really serious about this. We're really serious about speaking up, even though it's hard. We're really serious about experimenting, even though it's hard.
And you're talking about indirectly about accountability and ownership. And all of these companies have these accessory posters of these ideals that are shoulds, and you see them contradict themselves consistently. The team is number one, except for the fact that you've got this malignant narcissist in charge. We're innovative, we accept errors, except for the fact that you get walked to the door when you make one.
Right.
I'm wondering, what about that when the emperor is wearing no clothes and in fact the company is espousing certain ideals in their mission statement and behaving so differently from the end-on cord that you just described?
First of all, everyone knows it. They're saying it to each other behind closed doors. They say this, but this is what's real. They're recognizing that gap and everyone knows it. So it's kind of amusing in a way, in a sad sort of way, is that you can't really get away with it indefinitely. So when the words and the deeds are out of whack, what happens is it can work in the short term. It can look good for a while, but the wheels will come off because people are they're mailing it in, right? Their heart won't be in it. And that just won't produce the excellence that you really want. Now, I say that fully aware that it is hard, right? It's very hard. It's hard to be a great leader, right? It's hard to be honest and candid and humble. We would all rather come back and find no bullet points on our desk. And we have to sort of train ourselves to say it is actually good news when we come back and get the gift of 19 things we can do better. Right? That's good news, not bad.
That is how I took it, by the way.
Yeah, right. But that's really good and really healthy, but not necessarily the norm. So I think that we, as human beings, we have the capability to create those kinds of organizations and those kinds of teams where we're realistic about the challenges that lie ahead, and we're passionate enough about what we're trying to do to be willing to be open with each other, to be willing to speak up and ask for help. We've got to talk realistically and honestly and with enthusiasm about the reality that we're facing. But then as a leader, as a team member, as a colleague, it's still, to create more psychological safety, it's still essential to invite people's thinking, which is a fancy way of saying it's really important to ask questions, right? Genuine questions of each other, to show that kind of curiosity. I want to know what you think of this. Here's this idea I have, or here's something a customer said yesterday. I love your thoughts on it. And then listen, because think about how awkward it is. If someone asks you a question, just try. I mean, you're asking me questions. Just try sitting there mute. You can't do it. It would be so rude or awkward or something.
So awkward and so rude. Agreed.
So just ask, right? If you ask, and these are real questions, not leading questions, not the kind that are, I'm right? But if you ask a genuine question, you will more often than not, unless they're really terrified that you don't want to hear the truth, but you've already overcome that with step one, people will share their thinking, and that will be good. And of course, the third thing is, how do you react? Well, I totally disagree with what you just said. Well, that's probably not going to, you want to say, oh, that's interesting. Gosh, I got to say, I see it differently, but I want to understand your perspective more fully. I don't have to agree with you, but I do have to sort of be appreciative of the very fact that you spoke up.
Maybe you're seeing something that I missed. And my book comes out in October, and I have some hard copies of it. Gave one to one of my son's best friends, and she is annotating it. And I said, I really want to see your annotations and perhaps even your criticism, because your annotations will tell me what I need to tell people. And I'm also tripping on this idea that Danny Kahneman had of loving being wrong because it would get him closer to right. And then I'm thinking about the ideas that you're just talking about, these virtues that seem in some ways contradictory, except for the fact that they fit perfectly, almost like your former employer, Buckminster Fuller's dome. I'm seeing this dome comprised of humility and boldness paired with some curiosity, a soupçon of curiosity.
That's exactly right. And I think what you're describing there is a learner. Yeah, a learner who's kind of never gets to that point where they think, okay, now I know enough, right? I know that sounds silly because who would say that? But we often act as if, we may not say that out loud, but we sort of are at risk of acting as if I'm now an expert, right? I'm now done.
Right. And having to hold on to that. And what you're also kind of speaking to, the opposite of psychological safety, is something that's actually lionized. And you see books really, really talking about the power of Machiavellian thinking. Love and work are the two biggest topics in my office. No shocker. Sigmund Freud said it years ago. He got that one. What I hear about so often in my office, I'm in Silicon Valley, I'm working with these really heavy hitters, and yet they still talk about these pukey Machiavellian qualities. I'm practically turning green as I'm listening. What are your thoughts on Machiavellian versus psychological safety?
I truly think it's a short-term, long-term problem, right? I think Machiavelli can rule in the short term, and you can look pretty darn good, and the performance can look pretty darn good. I mean, at the extreme, you get an Enron situation. But for a robust, sustainable, enduring success or excellence, I think it's pretty hard to do that without transparency. Machiavelli's the opposite of transparency, right? It's, what do I say over here? What do I keep private over there? How do I, in a sense, trick people into doing things they wouldn't otherwise do to benefit what I see as my aims?
And then I'm thinking about another short-term idea that's lionized, and I think inappropriately so, and I'm going to call it hard-assery. I'm thinking of a college basketball coach who's lionized. I'm not saying him by name, versus, say, Steve Kerr, who gets winning results in the NBA by being kind. One of the people would throw chairs and speak horribly to his players, and people love him, except for the fact that he worked in the NCAA and he only had his players for up to 4 years. So you're basically corroborating something I've been thinking about.
You're burning them out to get
exactly. And so, but they win, but they're pretty much dried up. I don't know if this is true, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think sports have an awful lot to teach us and have limits because there's so much that goes into it. But maybe that's true with other organizations. You need talent. You need practice, the continuous improvement of your skills and your knowledge. But you use the word kind. I'm a strong believer in kindness, but it's not the same meaning as niceness.
Of course not.
Nice is taking the easy way out. Nice is something you want to hear. Nice is no bullet points, or other than that was great. But kind is generous. Kind is taking the time to say the hard thing because I care enough about you. And by the way, I don't have to assume I'm right, but I still have to feel that sense of responsibility to share what I'm thinking. And that's kind. It looks like you're very much in agreement with
beyond
that.
agreement. I've always said a good friend is someone who will tell you if you got a booger hanging from your nose, if you got spinach on your teeth, or your fly is unzipped. My mom, as a child, would correct my grammar. And to this day, if I do a malapropism, my mom, thank God, will say, Adam, you used that incorrectly.
I know. I love that. I'm often correcting people on the I versus me. I mean,
oh my God.
And then I think
it's omnipresent, by the way.
It's omnipresent. You now see it in published things.
It's become acceptable.
Acceptable, except if you took the other person's name out, the sentence would sound ridiculous.
I was talking with Valerie Friedland out of UNR. She wrote a book called Literally Dude, and she talks about the difference between something being grammatically correct and linguistically correct. And this I and me thing has become, I guess, linguistically correct, even though it's not. I love Strunk and White, but what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I think
what are we going to do? Exactly.
You and I made
it's a losing battle.
We have to just accept that one.
But I think that a leadership style that leads people to either hide the truth, see you coming, and organizational work, which I know better, there is such a strong temptation for that really tough kind of yelling, chair throwing type to tell them what they want to hear. It's human. You're not going to put yourself out there for target practice. So long as that person is not worried about not being the recipient of the truth, not having a clear line on what's really going on. So if you've got an activity for which that style works, and maybe basketball is one, because it's pretty straightforward what kinds of things work. You got to get that.
You can see it very quickly.
You can see it very quickly.
Over the long
feedback.
Term.
Yeah, right. And over the long term. So if your excellence requires a true internal commitment on the part of that person to work really hard because they want to, because they care, not because you're going to get really angry if they don't, then I think you end up depriving people of the opportunity to develop the real intrinsic motivation and take their own accountability, because you've taken over all accountability. Don't worry, guys don't have to be accountable. I'm going to be the one that's accountable, where accountable is almost a synonym for punishment in this case.
God. Well, I could talk to you forever. I am so over the moon talking to you. My wife, who I saw in the break room, she and I are both psychologists, and she's in the other room over there. I was like, I'm going to be talking to I can't believe it. I'm talking to Amy, So I'm going to give you my final question, but I mean, you have an open invitation to come back and do a part 2, 3, 4, and 5.
I loved it.
Oh my gosh, great. I've got a final question for you. It's a big one, since you already work at Hogwarts. So here it goes. Amy, if you had the magical power to confer upon all humanity one skill or awareness, what would that skill or awareness be? And how do you imagine it would improve the life of the individual? And since we're all connected, perhaps people around them, even society at large.
Oh, before you said awareness, I was going to say self-awareness.
You can use that.
Yeah. Okay. So self-awareness, but let me just even go a step further, because it's something I struggle with, and say generosity. Because I think we are at our best and we are happiest when we tap into the generosity that is a part of us. All little kids have some of it, but then they also have a kind of mind. And they and we fail to realize that when we hold on to it and we're not willing to share it and give it away, we're the ones who end up miserable. Right? So we can help others and we can help ourselves with a higher dose of generosity.
I could not agree more. I think about the generous people whom I've known. We were programmed biologically to give.
Right.
And when we can't give, that's one of the things the elderly actually suffer from. They want to give. And I'm thinking that in contrast to two characters in pop media. First one would be Gollum from Lord of the Rings, my precious, and same finger movement with Monty Burns in The Simpsons. So for sure, there's no happiness where there's no generosity.
In Dickens,
Scrooge,
right?
my goodness.
Right?
I'm
miserable.
Yes. And to contrast misery, I'm over the moon by your generosity to meet with me. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
It's so great to talk with you. And I do look forward to the next time.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.